This 5th episode of Obscure DOS Games video marks half season for the series. There's quite a few more coming as DOS was a bottomless well of gaming and there are hundreds of little known games to cover. For now, let's see what I've prepared for this week. Crime Does Not Pay is an arcade adventure where you can lead a Chinese or Italian crime family, controlling 3 of its most important members: a godfather that you take direct control of, an assassin, and a deadly young woman with an ultimate goal of having one of them elected as a mayor. Makes you wonder how come there's a Chinese mafia included and not Yakuza, right? Oh well, we'll never know. Anyway, the task is easier said than done, so you'll be bribing or blackmailing police chiefs, judges, bankers and your opponents. You'll fight off assassins sent against you, engage in shootouts with the police, all the while making sure that the money is flowing to bankroll your big ambitions. Each of the 3 members has a certain amount of health and 5 pockets, for the lack of a better word, to store and carry items, cash and anything else that may come in handy. Stuff like ammo, safe codes or incriminating evidence against important town figures among others. All 3 have different set of abilities too, and those need to be utilized appropriately, all the while making sure that you don't fall a victim to one of your opponents. We're most used to crime/mafia games being strategies or management titles, and Crime Does Not Pay is neither. It's a fresh take on a subject and it's a welcome change. That said, the game is very slow to start and may initially seem, well, boring. But if you give it time, it's actually pretty fun to complete it. Once. I see no reason to do it again, really. And not because it's a bad game, it's just when you complete it, you'll pretty much experience everything it has to offer along the way. Dawn Raider is a top-down vertically scrolling shooter where you control an assault craft fighting through 14 stages of a foreign country's land. Your plane is armed with missiles, machine gun or laser. That last one accessible by holding the fire button down, that then transforms your machine gun into it. Before entering a new stage, you always have to defeat some kind of a huge-ass enemy, usually nearly half-screen in size, and they all have one thing in common. They've been made out of sponges, as you have to sink seemingly bajillions of bullets and rockets in them before you even make a dent or any noticeable damage. Interestingly enough, the oil meter is actually your health, so with each hit that you take it will deplete a little, to eventually have you crash when it's down to 0. The enemies drop missiles, oil cans and laser power cells, which you can use to power your 3 weapons. Dawn Raider's presentation when speaking about both graphics and sound design is average, a definition of middle of the road for the time. It's not good enough that you'd want to talk about it after playing, and not so bad that it would detract from playing. And sometimes any publicity is good publicity, so even an extremely bad presentation could be better than something so average that it's forgettable. I mean, take a look at Pro Soccer 2190 on the Amiga. I keep coming back to it in like every 3rd or 4th video, but you'll never ever find me playing it again. That's how bad it is. But it lives on engraved in my memory forever. Anyway, Dawn Raider's best feature, as per usual in the genre, is its simultaneous 2-player mode, and that's how it should be experienced. Quik the Thunder Rabbit is an action platformer, and while it may seem very generic following the traditional platforming tropes known from consoles, like getting from start to the end of the level, left to right, platforming your way through and fighting off numerous baddies, Quik is actually quite fun. You battle your way against hordes of over-the-top cute creatures by turning yourself into a rolling ball, Sonic-like, smashing into them. Doing so, however, depletes your water and food reserves, which you need to refill by eating carrots and drinking water. You also get to collect hearts to refill your energy and 2 differently colored potions to enhance your skills. Red allows you to jump higher, while green speeds up you considerably. When using the latter, you're indestructible for a little while, or until you hit a wall. Keep that in mind. In some levels, all you need to do is find the exit, which I must add more often than not is straight as an arrow, all the way to the right. In others, you need to find the clock, which usually is within a sub-level, with door to it hidden somewhere in the main one. And since we're on a subject, the levels are huge and beautiful. Same as the rest of the presentation actually. And Quik, given how it looks and sounds and most importantly plays, should have been a much more popular title than it ever was. I mean, it's those little touches that make a huge difference, the variety of enemies, small bits of animations here and there, like main character's idle stance or face for instance. They really didn't need to be animated for the game to play as well as it does, but that seemingly insignificant change makes for a much more enjoyable package. Quik is a very polished product and probably one game worth most of your attention out of all included in this video. Flipout is an interesting take on Arkanoid. For all intents and purposes, the gameplay mechanics are identical, with paddle at the bottom and destructible elements on top of the screen. But there are some slight but noticeable changes to the formula. Namely, some elements seem to have been borrowed from pinball games. The destructible elements are not rectangular blocks anymore, but are of various shapes, and the game field is also filled with indestructible walls, placed at different angles. It all adds to randomness of ball's behavior and is a fresh take on the formula. Same as in Arkanoid, your goal is to clean the screen of all destructible objects. But unlike in the original, there's no lives in Flipout, and that's because the game is composed out of full screen stages, each level built out of 3 of these. And you always start on the third, so the topmost one. You can fall down to clear the bottom 2, but have to be careful not to drop down from the bottom one, as it's game over. Conveniently, each of the screens is initially blocked off with destructible blocks so that the ball would not fall through too early. I mean, who would have wanted their balls to fall through too early, right? Anyway, while the idea behind Flipout's loop is interesting and could prove for really fun and long-lasting gameplay, sadly, there's no power-up pickups falling out of destroyed objects. It may not be a game-breaking issue for most, but for me, it's too big of an omission to fully enjoy the game. Also, and that's worth pointing out, whenever I look at the ball's movement, I get a strong beach ball vibes, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. It just doesn't seem to move like either Arkanoid or pinball. Let me start by pointing out that whomever drew the title screen for Framed never saw human hands, or had been a victim of terrible, crippling accident. And if that's the case, then I'm sorry. I mean, take a look at it, and then grab something, anything that could have resembled a bar that the character on it is holding. There's no physical way that your hands would ever look like it, because we have opposing thumbs. Okay, I may be a bit too salty here, so I'll let it slide from now on. So, Framed is a side-scrolling adventure platformer, with an emphasis on adventuring, featuring a deep plot, 16 slots large inventory, and a whole plethora of logical and mechanical puzzles, some of which will require you to combine carried items to solve them. In fact, there's a lot of actions that you can take, from picking up of objects through examining to combining them among others. So it's worth to familiarize yourself with controls before playing, as they're a bit on a more complicated side. While the game features weapons and ammunition, it's entirely possible to avoid shooting enemies. Don't know if it's important for an everyday gamer, but those who like to challenge themselves or speedrun games could attempt that kind of a playthrough. Framed starts with you in jail where you've landed, and not because of your own fault. And during the course of the game you have to escape from it and then prove your innocence. A bit cliché, but overall fun plot to immerse yourself in. Bloodnet is a cyberpunk point-and-click adventure with some role-playing elements, and it's a truly weird game. On one hand, it takes place in a far-off future that's full of futuristic cyberpunk overtones and grim atmosphere, and on another, the game's filled with overarching occultist vampire themes. If it sounds like an odd combination, that's good, cause it is. But most importantly, it's an amazing dark adventure that feels at times more like a movie that you partake in and can influence the outcome of than the game. Despite complex puzzles and oppressive mood that's spilling from the screen by the bucket, Bloodnet has a powerful and deep plot that's perfectly paced and serving overwhelming A-class storytelling all throughout, especially during dialogues that are a definite highlight of the title, working as both a tool to learn about Ransom Stark, your character, and his motivations, and as a comedic relief, at times feeling as if their dry humor was out of place in the dystopian reality of the game. Story-wise, you've befallen with terrible syndrome, lost your job and home. But luckily, as everything was going down the drain, you were saved by an ingenious woman who implanted you with a prototype brain chip. It's an oversimplification, but I'm working on a limited time here, folks, so forgive me. All that just to be bitten by a vampire a little while later. Bitten, changed and feeling unlike yourself, all you want to do is to rid Manhattan of vampires and their evil leader Abraham Van Helsing. And with help of your chip, struggling to keep your humanity, save yourself from eventually becoming one too. Bloodnet's controls are not great, but given how amazing the rest of the game is, they're worth the pain, just to experience this incredible adventure from beginning to the end. Horror Zombies from the Crypt is a platform game heavily inspired by the 1950s and 60s B-movie horrors, and full of tropes found in these. You play as Count Frederick Valdemar and have to traverse through 6 levels of a mansion in search for schools. You gotta collect them all before you get to move to the next stage. If the game was all about picking schools only, however, it would be both simple and boring. So obviously the mansion throws heaps of enemies at you. Well, not the mansion itself, but they're there and they're out to get you. And this can be any and all ghastly creatures well known from books and movies of the genre, so anything from zombies and mummies, through vampires and werewolves, all the way to the Grim Reapers. You have to find keys to open locked doors too and have a weapon to kill the baddies. It's just a knife, but when there's nothing better around, a knife will have to do. Even if it's a butter knife, cause properly aimed butter knife is as dangerous as the spoon, regardless how insignificant spoons feel. In the right or more likely wrong hands, a spoon can be a weapon to be wary of. Let John Wick movies to be testament to that. Horror Zombies graphics are not the best, but they're good representation of an average for platformers on DOS in 1990. They're colorful and generally speaking not bad, but the animation is a bit jerky, with jumps feeling especially unresponsive, and enemy death animations having what seems just like 2 or 3 frames. It doesn't detract from playing, but is definitely noticeable. Sounds are. Yes, that's all I have to say about them. They are in the game. But I suppose you got to quote-unquote appreciate their pedestrian quality by now. All in all, Horror is not a bad game, and fans of platformers would definitely enjoy completing it. Would others do? I don't know, you tell me. Rotox is a top-down futuristic sci-fi action shooter. You play as former Lieutenant Kowalski, a mercenary from the Solar Exploration Corps who was mortally wounded and saved in a cyborg research facility by a conversion into a cyborg called Rotox. Basically, your Robocop scenario, but in a more far-off future. Your goal is simple: to exterminate any and all mechanical units in each level. These are divided into smaller 9 sections that are not linked with each other. The action is fast and frantic, and there is a lot of enemies to put down on each level. Thankfully, additional weapons are available for pickup throughout the game, so you should always have something to blast away the mechanical scum with. When all enemies are gone, the screen flashes, letting you know that you can move to the next sector. The first few levels are quite easy, letting you accommodate to a bit fiddly controls, but the further you go, the more demanding the game will become, eventually ending up being pretty tough. Rotox is presented in a top-down view with 3D rotoscope landscape, and the mixture of rotation and vector with sprite-based graphics makes up for an impressive for the time presentation, at least in VGA mode. EGA and CGA are rather horrible. Would I recommend Rotox today? It's hard to tell. Fans of shooters would definitely find something here to enjoy, but I'm not sure about others. The rotation gimmick may not be enough to keep them interested all throughout, you know. Wild Wheels feels like a mixture of classic speedball with modern Rocket League. So it's a sort of a football/soccer game with car destruction mechanics Frankensteined on top of it. The game basically is a series of elimination matches with the goal to defeat increasingly more difficult opponents and win all leagues. The rules are simple: you and your 4 CPU-controlled teammates have to bring the ball to the opposing team's goal, same as in Rocket League. But unlike in the aforementioned, points are not awarded for the goals only, but also for destroying enemy cars. And you gotta be careful about that, as same as theirs, your car can be put out of commission too. And it doesn't really take that much beating to have it totaled. The points can be spent between the matches to replace your team's cars with better ones, with higher stats and suited for specific on-field roles for an added layer of strategy. The camera can be placed in various positions, with the behind the car one being obviously most comfortable for playing. And there's 2 modes of control: Professional, when the car rotates when pressing left or right, and Arcade, which allows for direct turns. Whichever you pick, however, they will take a little while to get used to before they become a second nature. So if you're an impatient person, the game may not be for you. If you're patient, however, and master them eventually, you may grow tired of generally speaking repeatable gameplay loop along the way. But I suppose same could be said about any sports game. Circuit's Edge is a first-person role-playing with adventure elements in a futuristic cyberpunk setting based on George Alec Effinger's When Gravity Fails novel. It's set in a dark version of the future in which the Islamic religion has overtaken the world and is a dominant power all around. The game takes place in Budayan, the criminal and entertainment district of an unspecified Middle Eastern metropolis. You play as Marit Udran, a private investigator who, similarly to Tex Murphy in later Under a Killing Moon, is out of luck and on the verge of losing everything. So he does whatever possible to scrape every little penny he can, mainly doing petty delivery jobs. During one of those low-pay deliveries, you find your customer dead, and the authorities assume that you're responsible party. For better or worse, a powerful local mafia boss pulls some strings to get you off the hook. In exchange, you're tasked with finding out who's really responsible for the killing. And when you do, a much larger and convoluted scheme will unfold, spanning numerous hours of gameplay. Circuit's Edge is viewed from the first person and for the most part plays like an early dungeon crawlers, it's just based in an entirely different setting. Combat is turn-based and is your main source of income, although you can partake in gambling to supplement your earnings too. Money can be spent on cybernetic implants and modifications to upgrade your character's combat and hacking abilities. Your character needs to eat and rest to stay alive, and I suggest you do too, because you're important. If not to anyone else, then to me. I mean, we get to talk in the comments below from time to time, right? So eat and sleep and stay healthy, okay? Circuit's Edge may not be as good or as iconic as the aforementioned Under a Killing Moon was, but it's an interesting story and the game is quite fun if you're into either RPGs or adventure games. Swish is a Swedish mobile payment system. It's also an alcoholic drink that originated in the Trailer Park Boys TV series, made for quick inebriation rather than taste or to be palatable. And least fun, but most fitting, a sound made when things are moving fast. In this particular case, time as we went from beginning of this video to here, its end. I don't know about you, but I actually find today's selection of games quite interesting. They cover quite a few genres and for the most part are pretty good. Most of them were very obscure, couple of even I haven't heard of before, so there's definitely some homework I'll have to do when I get some time off work. If you enjoyed the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. They really help a lot. Especially that YouTube has a very weird decision-making process when it comes to who to show what, and you can't really count on it to serve you similar content next time it's out. Better yet, hit the little bell down there. Then it will make sure to send you a friendly notification when I release something new. Patreon and YouTube memberships are great help too, and allow me to release better content more often. Videos are also dropped a day early there, and I share all plans and upcoming changes so that members are always in the loop. If you can't or don't want to do that, likes and subscribes are great too. Most of all, however, I'd like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose channels recording used in the background of my commentary came from. They're all great, and their efforts in preserving classic gaming for the future is of utmost importance. So thank you. Links to their channels are in the description below and in a video on a ribbon at the top when the footage is used. They deserve your subscription, and they all have mine. For me, however, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.